Hi, my name is Mark McCaffrey, and I'm the founder of ECOS. First of all, thank you very much for being here today, wherever you are. For ECOS to survive and thrive in the coming years and decades, we really need your involvement. Over the next few minutes, I'd like to give you an overview of how ECOS has developed, where we are now, and with your help and insights, where we can go into the future. The vision of ECOS is simple: a world of empowered communities, governments, and actors networked to rapidly implement equitable and urgently needed climate solutions from the grassroots to the global scale. Our current mission is to serve as a coalition of community builders, a network of networks, enhancing the climate change education, communication, and outreach endeavors of the United Nations Climate Change Secretariat through the ACE program, its member states and subnational entities around the world. But more broadly, we aim to foster collaboration and exchange of transformative information, knowledge, and practices by broadening civic engagement, building capacity, and shaping policy. Obviously, that's a very tall order, and through the incredible efforts of a dedicated group of volunteers, we've made some good progress towards these goals. But given the urgency of the moment, we really need to step up our efforts to another level. Through the ECOS Design Charrette process, which begins now with the global dialogue, we will explore these topics and examine some of the challenges and opportunities for achieving them. 5 years ago, I asked the United Nations Climate Change Secretariat for permission to start this community, to set the stage for what is now ECOS. I've been involved with climate change education, communication, and outreach for over 20 years. And that's, of course, by no means a record, because there's others who have been involved for even longer, some of them through the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, often known as the UNFCCC, which virtually every nation on the planet signed back in 1992 as part of the Rio conference. 20 years ago, I started working with some of the top climate scientists in the world through one of the big climate laboratories in Boulder, Colorado, as an education and communication specialist. Prior to that, I was focused on water and related environmental issues. And while I had some knowledge of climate change, I didn't know the basics. Working with climate change scientists was a crash course for me to learn about the basics of human-caused global warming or climate change, and trying to translate the science for different audiences, for teachers and their students, for decision makers. In some cases, we needed to translate climate science for other scientists because it's complicated and is not often taught in most schools. It was clear that there was tremendous climate confusion everywhere. There still is, but it wasn't being taught well. The media focused on the political controversy all too often, and scientists themselves often struggled to communicate what could be done. Not only struggled to communicate the science itself, but they struggled to convey what could be done to slow or stop climate change. Starting in 2005, I had the chance to work with education, communication, and outreach experts around the world on climate-related projects through the International Polar Year. And it was an opportunity to collaborate internationally, which I found extremely exciting and enormously rewarding. But we were focused mostly on trying to increase climate literacy and awareness rather than advocate for action at that point. Fast forward to 2015, when my wife and I moved to Europe. At that point, I knew only a little bit about the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, which was signed by virtually every nation in the world, as I mentioned, in 1992, with the aim that nations would have common but differentiated responsibilities to tackle climate change. What surprised me when I first moved to Europe was that the convention also included the commitment from nations to develop education, training, and awareness programs, and to collaborate together with the aim of involving the public in developing adequate responses to climate change. This part of the convention was known as Article 6. And like the goal of substantially reducing greenhouse gas emissions, little work had actually been done to accomplish that goal, or those goals, really, towards informing and engaging the public and professionals so that they could be part of the solution. So I was excited to learn that the UN Climate Change Secretariat was also holding meetings to push forward the agenda of Article 6. And in June of 2015, I attended a meeting at the headquarters in Bonn, Germany, where these goals of education, training, and public engagement were rebranded as Action for Climate Empowerment, or ACE. It was decided that Article 6 of the convention was a little too complicated and not very exciting. So the decision was made to rebrand it, rename it as Action for Climate Empowerment. And oftentimes we just abbreviate it as ACE. In theory, every nation was to have a robust ACE leader and focal point who could help develop a national strategy. But like so many of the other aspirational goals of the UNFCCC treaty, while there were a few success stories, most countries had done little or nothing to follow through on these goals, especially in public engagement. The original Article 6 talked about how the public would be involved with developing adequate responses to climate change, and that simply wasn't being done on any kind of meaningful scale. So why is this? Like so many complex global issues, there's no single reason. But personally, I think that it's all too easy to say, let's involve the public. Of course, they should be part of the solution. But in practice, we've left climate change, like so many other problems, to the experts, the VIPs, the climate scientists, the politicians, the negotiators who jet around the world, going to conferences, coming up with top-down solutions that so far haven't really worked. Emissions continue to rise. In a moment, I will talk about the scaling of climate action, especially as it relates to education, communication, and outreach. But what we really need to do is find a solution that's not just top-down or bottom-up, but more of a middle-out transformation. I'll talk about that in a minute, but back to the story of ECOS. After attending COP25 in Paris and seeing substantial energy and innovation around education, communication, and outreach, which was addressed in Article 12 of the Paris Agreement, it occurred to me that we needed a dedicated constituency like the one for youth, Youngo, or the one for research and independent organizations, Ringo. So I contacted the Secretariat and suggested that they endorse the idea. Right before COP26 in Marrakesh, the Secretariat gave their approval, but not for as a constituency, rather as a community. There were some particular technical reasons why we couldn't be endorsed as a constituency. Nevertheless, as a community, we'd be recognized by the Secretariat. We would have standing in the sense that we could host side events at subsidiary body and the COP conferences. And we would be able to engage directly with the Secretariat. Since then, ECOS has evolved as a volunteer-driven community of people around the world, most of them involved with existing non-governmental organizations, and all of them committed to the goals of Action for Climate Empowerment. We have engaged closely with the UN Climate Change Secretariat and observers. We've provided input and participated in UNFCCC ACE negotiations and related activities. We've shared information, expertise, and support to help each other navigate and participate in the UN climate processes, as well as to advance the implementation of ACE. We've hosted weekly community calls to foster collaboration with fellow climate practitioners, educators, and advocates around the world, both within and outside the UNFCCC. And we've convened, just in the past year, the Learn for Climate campaign that Isate Sintron and Laura Weiland have taken on with various partner organizations to help coordinate efforts and strengthen the momentum of ACE as we head towards COP26. Of course, many of us were planning to meet in Bonn, Germany last June, and also in Glasgow this past December at COP26, and that hasn't happened. But we now can take advantage of these tools through Zoom and other tools to be able to communicate now with you all so that we can clarify our vision and make plans for how to move forward for robust climate action. Others will talk a little bit more about what we've accomplished, where we are now, and share some additional ideas about where we'd like to go. But I would like to leave you all with one other idea that may help us think about scaling. how to scale these efforts to build capacity, especially at the community and urban scale. Between the individual and everyone on the planet, there are 10 orders of magnitude, meaning from one person, we add zeros to each scale until we reach 10 billion, which is the estimated human population of the planet by 2050. So that offers a very simple framework, 1, 10, 100, 1,000, et cetera, on up to 10 billion. Over the past decades, we've been focused on large-scale, billions and millions of people, top-down efforts driven by countries to solve the climate conundrum. There's also been a focus on what things that individuals and households can do to change their behaviors. But what if many of the solutions are actually addressed more in the middle, more in the range of tens or hundreds of thousands of people, more at the community and neighborhood scale? A few months back, a group of us published a paper in the journal Environmental Research Letters using data from Project Drawdown, where we found that the scales where there was the biggest impact, the largest number of opportunities for transformation to a more regenerative, survivable future, is between 10,000 and 100,000 people. This is the scale of villages, neighborhoods, school districts, utility districts. It's a human scale where the local and the global converge. Some people call it the glocal scale. It's sort of merging local and global. And many of us feel this is where we can be putting much more focus to inform and engage the public, and also work with professionals to reduce climate risks and increase our resilience, whether to climate challenges, pandemics, social and economic destabilization, or all the above, since they tend to be all merged together and overlapping these days. ECOS is a potential vessel to work at multiple scales, internationally through the UNFCCC, at national and subnational scales with governments and civil society, with learners and activists. But we need to build our own capacity in order to help others build theirs. We need to sort out how we are organized and governed. Should we have a paid staff to handle day-to-day communications and outreach? Should we have an incorporation of ECOS as a non-governmental organization? What does membership of ECOS really mean? In this dialogue process, and next month in our more in-depth design charrettes, we will be exploring more where we've been, where we want to go, and what we need to do to get there. In terms of outcomes, I hope that by the end of this process, we will have resolved how to best organize ourselves so that we can help others, since thus far over the past 4 years, we've accomplished a great deal on volunteer power, which is very much appreciated. But for our next phase, we really need to resolve how we can best serve as a network of networks, a coalition of community builders. I'm grateful for this opportunity to share a little more background about myself and ECOS, and I look forward to learning from all your brilliant ideas and inspiring thoughts. And I'll leave you with a few slides from some of our ECOS activities. This was a slide from SB 50 in June of 2019. We had meetings every day at 10 o'clock that were very informal, but it was a way that we could share information and help to sort out some of the challenges we face in terms of moving forward to have better coordinated, better funded education, communication, and outreach. And these are some of our ECOS friends and colleagues at SB 50. This was actually taken from Madrid at COP26, and Cedric from Climate Collage is explaining their card game, which is a really quite brilliant tool for helping to increase climate literacy and help people understand what can be done to rapidly and radically reduce emissions. This was one of our daily meetings at COP25 at COP25 in Madrid. And here's some of our team, the dedicated volunteers who have really helped ECOS move forward over the past several years. And finally, this is from some of our negotiations that we were not directly involved with, but we participated in as observers. This was in Bonn, Germany at SB 50. And finally, please, if you're not familiar with Learn for Climate, check it out on our website. You'll learn more about it over the course of the design charrette process. And then I would like to just, again, highlight the powers of 10 approach that we feel has tremendous opportunity to help us be thinking about how to scale efforts, both from the bottom up and the top down, so that we can kind of merge our efforts in the middle. Because there is a sweet spot we found for being able to scale a lot of climate solutions, a lot of climate interventions, and that is often at the community, meta-community, and urban scale. But it's also, this powers of 10 approach can help us understand that there's only been 100 billion Homo sapiens who have ever lived, meaning that 1 out of every 10 people that have ever been alive are alive today. For those of you interested in our Powers of 10 paper, please take a look at the paper in Environmental Research Letters. It's freely available and open source on the internet. And again, thank you all very much for listening to me today, and please let me know if you have any questions, and we will look forward to further learning from you and hearing your ideas in the dialogue to come.